let me begin by saying that our method is first to outline a book of the Bible when we begin a study of it. And we have outlined the epistle to the Romans. The broad outline is we have it divided into 3 sections. The first 8 chapters, it's doctrinal, and faith is the subject. Salvation by faith. Justification by faith. And then in Romans 9, 10, and 11, we have a dispensational section that deals with the nation Israel. Its past, its present, and its future. And then in Romans 12 through 16, the subject is duty. Those that have been justified by faith have a duty. And we'll see as we move along that we break down each one of these sections. Fact of the matter is that when I go out to hold a conference and teach the epistle to the Romans, I have an altogether different outline that I use. I divide it something like this. First, salutation, first 17 verses of chapter 1. The next is sin, verse 18, chapter 1 through chapter 3, verse 20. Salvation is the third division, beginning with verse 21 of chapter 3 through 10th verse of chapter 5. Then sanctification is the fourth division, chapter 5, verse 11 through the 23rd verse of chapter 6. Then struggle, chapter 7. Then spirit-filled living, chapter 8, 1 through 27. And then security, chapter 8, verse 28 through 39. Then we have segregation, chapters 9 through 11. And then sacrifice and service, chapters 12 and 13. Separation, chapters 14 and 15. And then a closing salutation in chapter 16. And that is, again, a very simple division of this book. Now, as we come to this very marvelous, wonderful book of Romans, there are 2 matters I'd like to talk about, and one is the man who wrote the epistle and the city to which he wrote the epistle. And, of course, when we get into the epistle, we'll see the third great matter, and that is the subject, which, of course, is the righteousness of God. Now, let me say just a word concerning Paul the Apostle. We've actually come now to a different method of revelation. God has used many ways to communicate to man. He gave the Pentateuch, the law, through Moses. He gave history. He gave poetry. He gave prophecy. He gave the Gospels. And we come to a new section, and they're epistles. Dr. Deisman tried to make a division between epistles and letters. He wrote a very ponderous tome, Light from the Ancient East, and he examined the papyri that was found at Oxyrhynchus in Egypt. And he tried to make a division that a great many scholars today think is entirely false, and therefore Paul's epistle to the Romans is an epistle, and it's a letter. You don't make a division like that. It becomes very personal. And these letters that we have, these epistles, they are so warm and so personal that as far as you and I are concerned, it's just as if it came by special delivery mail to us today. And the Lord is speaking to us in each one of these very wonderful letters that Paul wrote to these different churches and the other apostles also. Now, Paul makes this statement in the 15th chapter of Romans at verse 15. Let me read this. Nevertheless, brethren, I have written the more boldly unto you in some sort, as putting you in mind, because of the grace that's given to me of God, that I should be the minister of Jesus Christ to the Gentiles, ministering the gospel of God, that the offering up of the Gentiles might be acceptable, being sanctified by the Holy Spirit. Now, Paul makes it very clear that he was the apostle to the Gentiles. He also makes it very clear that Simon Peter was the apostle to the nation Israel. He says, for instance, in Galatians, the 2nd chapter, verses 8 and 9, he says, "For he that wrought effectually in Peter to the apostleship of the circumcision, the same was mighty in me toward the Gentiles. And when James, Cephas, and John, who seemed to be pillars, perceived the grace that was given unto me, they gave to me and Barnabas the right hands of fellowship, that we should go unto the Gentiles, and they unto the circumcision." Therefore, you see that Paul was peculiarly the apostle to the Gentiles. Now, when you read the last chapter of Romans and see all those people that Paul knew, most of them are Gentiles. The church in Rome was largely a Gentile church. Now, Paul also makes it very clear that if somebody else had founded the church in Rome, he would never have gone there. He says, for instance, that he was eager to go there. He says, "So as much as in me is, I'm ready to preach the gospel to you that are at Rome also." Now, he wanted to go to Rome to preach the gospel. And in the 26th chapter of Acts, verse 17, why, the Lord, who appeared to Paul, told him, as he gave his great message to Agrippa, "Delivering thee from the people and from the Gentiles, unto whom now I send thee to open their eyes, turn them from darkness to light, from the power of Satan unto God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and inheritance among them which are sanctified by faith that is in me." Now, Paul makes it also very clear he'd never have gone to Rome, although he was eager to go, if anyone else had preached the gospel ahead of him. In Romans 15, verse 20, he says, "Yea, so have I strived to preach the gospel, not where Christ was named, lest I should build upon another man's foundation." And Paul just didn't go where no other apostle had been. So no one had been to Rome.